I've always been a guy who needs to get outside, to break away from the concrete and the noise and just let the woods remind me what quiet really feels like. I'm not really the type who does it for Instagram or tell people that I escape to nature on the weekends. I need it like I need sleep. That's probably why I was all ears when my buddy Tyler told me about a creek on the backside of a ridge, around 2 hours from where I live. According to him, no one went back there anymore. That old trail was basically erased when a service road was built a few years back, and people just forgot about it, which to me sounded like a gift from God. So Tyler's the kind of guy who's always brimming with half-baked plans and back pocket shortcuts, so I had him lay it all out for me. He promised if I followed his directions exactly, I'd end up at the kind of fishing hole people would daydream about. Deep pools, overhanging willows, shaded banks. No tourists, no hikers, no boot prints in the mud. It would be me, the water, and that kind of quiet you only get in a place where the world's overlooked. So I spent Friday night packing up my gear: fishing rod, small tackle box, a couple of sandwiches, of water, and a .45 that I carry when I'm inside remote areas, and the rest of the standard odds and ends you would need. I'm not a prepper or anything, but I've done enough solo hikes to know you don't really mess around with this kind of stuff. You gotta plan for a good time, but prepare for a bad one. Saturday morning came. The sky was a kind of clear blue that practically begs you to hit the road. The drive out there was pretty uneventful though, just me rolling through backcountry highways, and old barns sliding past me, the occasional deer crossing sign of course, and just that gnawing excitement that comes before a new adventure. I hit that last turnoff that Tyler had mentioned to me, a gravel pullout near the edge of a tree line. Sure enough, there was this old slope leading down. No signs, no markers, just a faint depression of a trail that had been there long before that road had. I parked and did a quick check on my gear and started down it. The sun was filtering through the pines in long fingers, that kind of dance on your skin and make you forget for a second that you're heading inside a place that doesn't really care if you come back from. There was also this certain thrill to it. Sure, being out there where people don't go anymore, where cell phone signal dies and the only sounds you hear are the wind and the birds. But that's the point, isn't it? No one to bother me, no one to bother with me either. The trail actually looked better than I expected it to. It was narrow, sure, but packed dirt and a few old switchbacks, and a constant downhill grade that lets you know you're leaving the familiar behind you. I moved at a steady pace, heart light, eyes sharp. Somewhere below, that creek waited for me like a secret. I'd been on the trail for maybe 45 minutes when I hit the first switchback. The descent was steady, but nothing too punishing. No need for trekking poles or careful footwork. Pines flanked on both sides, their needles softening the ground, the air nice and cool and clean. Birds chattered overhead, and for a while, I let myself sink back into that rhythm, one boot fall after another, red tube gently knocking against my pack. Now, around 2 miles in, things changed. The trail curved left, hugging the side of the ridge when I came to a fork that I hadn't been warned about. Tyler's directions were usually pretty thorough, obsessive even. He'd mentioned no fork, no deviation, just follow that trail all the way down. But here it was, 2 narrow paths splitting at a patch of brush. One angled to the left, toward a strand of sycamores. The other veered to the right, steeper, rougher, cutting deeper into the canyon. I stood there for a moment, chewing on the inside of my cheek, scanning the treetops as if the right answer might be hanging there in front of me. The left trail looked like it just wrapped around the ridge, maybe skirted the canyon, but the right hand dropped hard, where the water should inevitably be, right? So I took the right. And at first, it did feel like the right call. The trail narrowed but stayed visible, flanked by a rock outcropping and a cluster of oaks. But half a mile in, it began choking down. Shrubs and young saplings pressed in on me, branches clawing at my sleeves. I had to duck under deadfall twice, and the ground was getting wetter, mud slick under my boots. I pushed on still though, figuring it had to open up. And this is where I noticed the silence around me. At first it was very subtle, just the fading of a bird song, the way my boots sounded sharp against the ground, but soon it was like the woods had swallowed their own voice. I paused, hands on my hips, catching my breath. Something about that stillness just made the hairs on my neck rise up. I turned back to look up the trail, and there I saw a figure, just barely peeking from behind a tree, maybe 50 yards up. It was a blink, a flicker of movement, there and gone. Dark hair, pale skin, maybe a woman? I froze, my heart began to hammer. Logic now kicked in, telling me, okay, it's just another hiker, or maybe a local who knows the area better than you do. But that trail was a complete mess. Nobody in their right mind would come down this way unless they were as stubborn or dumb as I was. So I called out to them. Hey, are you all right back there? Of course, I got nothing in response, no reply, no sound of any footsteps. So I waited, counting in my head. 1, 2, 3. But the woods in front of me remained dead quiet. My skin began to crawl at the thoughts. I shifted my pack and gave those woods another hard look and then turned back down trail. The trees began to thicken, crowding the path until the trail just straight up vanished. Ahead it was nothing but undergrowth and scattered boulders. Across this narrow ravine, I almost missed it. Sat what looked like some kind of makeshift camp. A tarp hung low between two trees, a pile of firewood stacked under an oak, an old Coleman cooler tilted on its side. Someone was or had been living out here. My stomach turned at the thought. Maybe I hadn't imagined that figure after all. Then, that's when I did hear footsteps, soft, almost thoughtfully, moving through the brush to my left. I froze, ears straining, feeling my throat go dry. Suddenly, I slid my phone from my pocket, not to call anybody, there wasn't any bars out here, but to use the screen like a mirror. I angled it over my shoulder, and there between the trees, maybe 30 feet back, was indeed a woman. Thin, tangled hair, clothes dark and baggy. She wasn't walking toward me, at least not directly, but weaving through the trees, keeping pace, eyes flicking between the ground and where I stood. I didn't want to wait anymore. I turned and started back uphill, keeping my pace steady, pretending not to notice her. I didn't sprint, not yet, just moved fast enough to show that I was leaving the area. My hands were itching for that 45 on my hip, but drawing it now felt like this kind of escalation that I wasn't quite ready for. The trail then narrowed, pinched by this fallen tree, and I jumped it, gasping and tasting copper on my tongue. My mind spat half-formed plans out, loser at the fork, call out if I saw anybody, fire a warning shot if I had to. The sounds behind me grew sharper, more desperate. Sticks snapping, breathless hitches, the slap of soles against dirt. Enough. I yanked that 45 from the holster and fired 2 shots into the air. The echo cracked through the trees like a whip, and for a heartbeat the woods froze as well. And then through the hush, the unmistakable sound of retreat, footsteps pounding back the way they come. I spun around and caught a quick glimpse of her, the woman, hair flying, arms pumping, bolting back down the trail like something feral, something that had been burned by the sound of that gun. I holstered the pistol, wiped sweat from my brow, and kept climbing. No stopping now, no stopping until I saw my truck. The climb out of that canyon felt twice as long on the way back. My legs were burning, lungs straining, every muscle wired tightly, waiting for the slap of feet to return behind me. But the woods had gone still again, almost too still, like they were watching, holding their own breath. I kept my head down and pushed up the trail, counting every bend and switchback, feeling sweat bead down my spine. I told myself over and over, do not look back, do not give her that satisfaction, do not show her that you're scared. But every now and again, I couldn't help it. I'd glance over my shoulder, eyes darting through the trees. Nothing, just shadows, just the wind teasing the undergrowth. When I hit that fork again, I barely slowed. I could see now how I'd been led wrong. The overgrown path that I had taken was just subtle enough to pull somebody in without really thinking. Tyler's directions had been clear, no forks, no turns, which meant the path shouldn't have existed, and my gut twisted at that thought. The last mile was a complete blur. The sky was starting to dim and the sun was dipping behind the ridge. The woods were slipping into that blue-gray half-light that makes everything look wrong. Every sound around me was amplified. The snap of twigs, the hush of the wind, my own ragged breathing. I kept my hand near that gun, listening for anything and everything. By the time I saw the edge of the trees in the shape of my truck parked in that gravel turnout, it almost felt like a hallucination. I half stumbled up that last stretch, boots slipping and heart hammering like it wanted out of my chest. I threw my gear in the back seat without any kind of ceremony, climbed into the cab and locked the doors. I sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, forehead resting against the rim, letting the tremors roll throughout me. My mouth was dry, tongue sticking to the roof, and when I finally started the engine, the sound nearly made me flinch. That drive home was dead quiet for 2 hours. No music, no podcast, just the hum of the tires and the relentless replay of what I'd seen. The woman's pale face between trees, the ragged clothes, the way she sprinted when those shots rang out. When I got home, I didn't even unpack. I walked inside, sat on the couch, and rang Tyler. He picked up on the second ring, voice easy and relaxed.
Yo, how was it? Catch anything good?
I swallowed. My throat was raw. Hey, quick question. Are you really sure about that trail? You said no forks, right?
Yeah, man, dead straight. It's been a couple of years since I was down there, though, but it's a simple run.
He paused.
Why, did you get turned around or something?
There was a fork, though. About 2 miles in, took me off the main trail and down toward a ravine. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Tyler, are you sure you're remembering right? There was a pause on the line, just enough to raise every hair on my arm. Then his voice came back a little quieter.
Dude, no, there's no fork. There's never been one.
I closed my eyes and my skin felt cold all over, like the sweat I'd worked up on the climb had now frozen in place. I told him I'd fill him in later, hung up and just sat there in the dark, listening to my house settle, every creak and pop sounding a little too sharp for my own comfort. My mind would not let it go. The fork, the woman, the camp tucked away like an old scar in the landscape. Sleep didn't come easy that night. And I'm sure you can guess, I never went back to that canyon, not once, not even to check if the fork was actually still there. Tyler tried to talk me into another trip months later, but I turned him down straight up. Whatever's down there, or whoever's down there, can keep it. I hadn't been back to my hometown in, 30 years now? Maybe even more than that. I was just a kid when we left, first or second grade, I think. And after that, it was like we cut ties. My parents moved us a few states over and life just kept on rolling. I didn't think much about that little place once we were gone. But last month on a work trip, I found myself driving within 20 miles of it, and something was tugging at me. I don't know if it was curiosity or some kind of itch to connect the dots, but I thought, why the hell not? Let's check it out. I wrapped up on my meetings early, punched the old town into my phone, and pointed that rental car right toward it. I figured I'd drive through, snap a couple of pictures, maybe grab some lunch, have a decent story to tell. It's funny how memory works. As I rolled into the outskirts, things flicked in and out of recognition. The welcome sign, faded and leaning, but familiar. The wide main street with its mix of brick storefronts and newer, uglier buildings. That school zone sign near what had to have been my old elementary school, Crestwood Elementary, still clinging to the front in chipped metal letters. I think I actually remembered one of my teacher's names, Mrs. Barry, though for the life of me I couldn't recall her face. That town definitely wasn't much bigger than I remembered it to be. Maybe 10,000 people now, but it still had that mix of small town charm and slow decay. As I drifted through those streets, I passed new subdivisions shoved up against the old sagging houses with peeling paint and yards that looked like they'd given up many, many years ago. The new and old rubbed shoulders here, and not always gracefully. I found the office building where I think my dad worked for a little bit, but the sign was gone. But the brickwork looked familiar and right. The corner store where my mom used to pick up groceries was now some kind of vape shop, which felt weirdly appropriate for the times. I cruised through a few neighborhoods, making loose loops, trying to piece together where our old house had been. It was trickier than I expected. I'd been so sure that I remembered it when I saw it, but street after street blurred right together. Ranch homes, picket fences, trees that had grown thick over the years. Then, just as I was about to call it, a house quickly snagged my eye. I slowed my car down. Big oak tree in the yard, a narrow drainage culvert running along the front, those thin vertical windows. Yeah, this is it. It had to be. I circled the block once, then twice, watching it from different angles until I fully convinced myself. Feeling a little dumb, I pulled over, parked at the curb, and stepped out. I fished my phone from my pocket and aimed it at the house. Took a few quick pictures. It felt harmless, a bit of nostalgia, nothing more. Then, behind one of those narrow windows, somebody moved. A face, a shape, watching me. I felt the flush of embarrassment hit my neck as soon as I saw the figure in the window. Some part of me knew how this probably looked. Middle-aged guy in a rental car loitering at the curb, snapping pictures of somebody's house like a total creep. I raised my hand in this awkward little wave, hoping to smooth it over, but the figure did not wave back. They just watched me. For a second, I thought maybe I should slip back into the car and just drive off. But there was something stubborn within me that just pushed back. I'm here, damn it. This is the house I grew up in, or at least I thought it was. I wanted to explain myself, maybe hear something about the old place, or maybe even get a look inside. So I drew in a quick breath, squared my shoulders, and walked up the path. That front door opened before I even reached it. The person who stepped out onto the porch was hard to pin down. Medium height, soft around the middle, shapeless old clothes, a faded hoodie and sweatpants, both stained, and thinning hair pulled back in some kind of oily knot. Their face was pale and doughy, featureless in that way that almost made my brain skip. Was it a male or female? I couldn't really say yet. Their eyes were small and watery, and they flicked over me with this expression that I couldn't quite read. "Hey there," I started again, raising a hand. "I apologize if I startled you. I grew up here years ago. I just happened to be in town and thought I'd swing by just to, see it once more." The figure on the porch tilted their head slightly and then gave me this small, stiff nod. Their mouth worked for a second like they were figuring out how to use it. "You want to see inside?" The voice was high and thin, but not quite feminine. It set my nerves jangling, but I smiled, trying to cover the tension crawling up my spine. Sure," I said lightly, stepping back onto the porch. "If that's okay with you." They stepped back and held the door wide, and I crossed that threshold. The smell was what hit me first. It was like a gut punch. Rot, cat piss, sour old trash. The air was thick with it, the kind of smell that sinks into your clothes and your skin. My nostrils flared, and I fought the instinct to cover my face. The living room was a minefield of garbage, old pizza boxes, soda cans, clothes draped over every surface. The carpet was stained with black in places, the walls were yellowed with grime. But what froze me was the figure curled up on the couch, under a filthy comforter, unmoving, just the shape of a person, bundled up tight, head tucked in, like they'd been swallowed whole by the house itself. "Wow," I said, forcing a smile. "This place sure has changed." The front door clicked. I turned in time to see the lock twist and the figure on the porch, now between me and the way out. And then they opened their mouth and screamed. Not a yell, not words, just this raw animalistic sound, bursting out of them like they were tearing up their own throat. "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hey," I shouted, hands up, backing away. "I didn't mean anything, stop." They kept screaming, stepping towards me, arms jerking in these short, frantic spasms. I stumbled back into the living room, nearly tripping over a stack of newspapers. Okay. Hey, I'm leaving. I spun toward the kitchen, heart battering in my ribs, shoes slipping on greasy linoleum. I hit the back door and yanked at it, nearly sobbing when it stuck. I slammed one of my shoulders into the frame and the door burst open. And then I was face to face with a chained pit bull, teeth bared, froth flecking at its black lips, a chain rattling against the fence as it strained towards me. Fuck. I reeled back and ducked to the side, scrambling between the house and the shed, thorns tearing at my arms as I fought my way back to the front yard. My brain was nothing but static, breath burning in my chest, feet slipping on dirt and dead leaves. As I rounded the corner, I saw them, the figure back from the porch, tearing across the grass toward me, mouth still open in that nightmarish scream, hands clawing at the air. Get the fuck away from me, I barked, shoving hard as they lunged at me. They then staggered sideways, feet tangling in the grass. I didn't wait to see them hit the ground. I slammed into the car door and wrenched it open, dove inside and jammed the lock down with shaking fingers. When the engine roared to life, I whipped the car around in a spray of gravel, tires shrieking as I shot back down that road. In the rear view, I caught a last glimpse of the yard. The figure collapsed in a heap on the lawn, and a neighbor, this older man in work clothes, hurrying across the street toward them, hand raised in this calming gesture. I was breathing super hard. My chest was aching and my hands were shaking so badly I barely kept my car straight on the road. What the fuck was that? What just happened? I hit the cross streets at the end of the block, heart still jackhammering in my chest. I didn't even realize I'd been muttering under my breath that whole time until I heard myself. Fragments of cursing, half-formed prayers, a constant stream of noise to drown out that panic. I finally forced myself to slow the car and just take it all in where I was. That's when it clicked. The corner of the old stone church on one side, the gas station on the other, it was familiar. I eased to a stop, hands trembling on the wheel, and looked left. And there, tucked on the opposite side of the lane, was the house. My house. Neat little lawn, fresh paint on the porch, curtains pulled back in the front window. There was a garden in the side yard, rows of flowers, and a woman gray-haired stooping, wearing a floppy sun hat, tending to those plants with this quiet focus. I sat there staring across the street as the realization sank into my bones like cold water. I'd taken a wrong turn back there, circled a block far too wide, and drifted down the wrong street, landed at somebody else's door. Somebody whose life had clearly gone off the rails in a way that I couldn't have imagined. I watched the woman for a few seconds longer, and she moved slowly, deliberately, trimming back the hedge, tucking a stray lock of hair underneath her hat. She never looked up, and I didn't get out. Whatever urge I felt earlier to connect with my past, to revisit the rooms where I'd once played with toys and eaten cereal on Saturday mornings, it was long gone now, burnt out. All I wanted was to get back on the highway and away from these streets and away from that rot and confusion and narrow escape. I turned the wheel and pulled away from the intersection, heading back towards the main drag. Somewhere I figured there had to be a diner or a sandwich shop that I could stop at, drink something cold, catch my breath before the long drive home. But even as I drove, that image of the first house would not leave me. The smell, the screaming shapeless figure, and that face behind that bundle on the couch, hidden under the reeking blanket. Now, I never saw it, and I'm grateful for that, but the shape of it has stayed with me, pressed into the back of my mind. And I told myself it was just a wrong turn. Every summer when Kate and I would go to visit my dad in the city, it felt like stepping into another life. We lived with my mom the rest of the year, inside a small town where nothing really would ever happen, but the minute we hit Dad's place, everything seemed to speed up. There were a lot more cars, more lights, and a lot more noise. And that summer, when I was 14 and Kate was 11, all I could think about was the mall. It was the early 2000s when the mall was really everything. The food court, the music stores, the rack of jeans and hoodies, places you would go to hang out and be seen. My dad didn't get it, but he humored us. As soon as we arrived that weekend, I was already making plans with Kate and Kelly, this neighbor girl that I'd known for a couple of summers. Kelly was 15, a little bit cooler than us and a little sharper, but we were set, just the three of us unleashed upon that mall. When Saturday came, Dad agreed to drop us off. 2 hours, he said, then meet him at the same entrance. Easy enough. We were jittery with excitement, clutching our allowance, ready to chase down the stores that I've been dreaming about all year long. The second we spilled out of my dad's car, we were off like a shot. The mall doors whooshed open and swallowed us into this blur of music, perfume, and a constant shuffle of other people. Kelly took the lead at first, guiding us through the first wave of stores. Claire's, Wet Seal, Hot Topic, while Kate clung to my side, wide-eyed and grinning. We blew through our money fast, grabbing lip gloss, cheap jewelry, and a couple of graphic tees. We hit the food court for soda, laughing so hard that we choked on the drinks itself. For those first 90 minutes, everything was perfect. And that's when it hit me. I remembered the store. Last summer, I stumbled upon this tucked away place that had the best jeans. Not just cheaper, but better. And for some reason, I immediately became obsessed with finding it again. I convinced Kate and Kelly to follow me, weaving us deeper into the mall's belly, past stores I no longer recognized, past the scent of pretzels and fries, into quieter wings where the music dimmed and the crowds thinned out as well. I swear it's just past this next corner, I kept saying. But every corner led to another dull stretch of storefronts, another maze of turns. Kelly began to fidget, glancing at her phone. Kate was a lot quieter now, looking up at me with that younger sibling worry as I tried to pretend that I didn't see it. I think we should head back, Kelly said finally. Just 2 more minutes, I promised, feeling the heat rise up in my cheeks. I was so sure, just dead sure that it was just ahead of us. We turned one last corner and walked straight into a dead end. It was blindingly white, except for the 2 gray employee-only doors. The soft hum of overhead lights buzzed in the silence, and I stared at it, my mouth now dry and chest tight with a sudden snap of realization that we were deep in the mall and completely turned around. Then behind us came this soft laugh. We whipped around. 2 guys were standing there, older, maybe 17 or 18. Both wore black hoodies, jeans hanging low, their faces thin and sharp under greasy hair. One had a smear of acne across his chin. The other twirled a keychain around his finger, the clink of metal sharp in the stillness. "Hey," Acne Guy said, grinning widely. "Are you girls lost?" "No," Kelly said quickly. "We're fine." "Oh yeah?" Keychain Guy said, stepping closer. "You guys look pretty turned around to me." My stomach bottomed out. Kelly then slid in front of us, chin raised. "Back off!" She whipped out her phone, and before I could blink, Acne Guy lunged. He snatched it from her hand and snapped it clean in half, the crack of plastic echoing off the walls. Kate made a small noise like a sob caught in her throat. "Don't," I breathed. The other guy pulled something out from his pocket, a knife, small and silver, glinting in the light. He smiled without showing any of his teeth. "All right, let's play a game, girls," he said softly. "Drop your bags and drop your clothes." Kate whimpered, Kelly's fist clench, and I could feel the edges of my vision start to go blurry. My heart was thudding in my throat so loud it drowned out everything else. And then a voice cut through it all. "Hey!" We all froze. An older man was striding toward us, walkie-talkie in hand, can of pepper spray in the other. Security. He wore that uniform like armor, dark jacket, stiff cap, and his face was hard and cold. "The hell's going on here?" He barked at us. The boy spun. Hoodie Guy yanked his up, covering his face, and Acne Guy ducked his head, and without another word, they bolted, sneakers slapping the tiled floor as they disappeared round the corner. The security guard stopped in front of us, breathing hard, eyes darting after them, then down at us. "Are you girls okay?" I nodded, shaking all over, and Kelly was shaking too, fists still clenched. Kate was in tears, sagging against my side. "Come on, girls," this guard said, voice gentler now. "Let's get you somewhere safe." The walk to the office felt endless. My legs were rubber, my chest was tight, every step buzzing with leftover fear. Kate was clinging to my arm, still sniffling, and Kelly just stayed quiet. Her jaw was set and eyes hard. The security guard didn't really say much, just led us through side hallways, occasionally speaking into his radio. Inside that office, the lights were harsh. The walls were bare except for a map of the mall and a rack of keys. Another guard handed us some tissues, and somebody called my dad. I sat there shaking, trying to replay it all in my mind. The grin, the snap of the phone, the flash of the knife. It felt like a bad dream. My dad showed up 20 minutes later, breathless and face pale. He crushed Kate and me into a hug so tight I thought I was going to pass out, then pulled Kelly in too, muttering thanks to the security guards. We told him our story and everything once we got in the car, our voices tumbling over one another, and when we finished, his face was this strange mix of fury and guilt. "I shouldn't have left you girls alone," he muttered, gripping the steering wheel hard. "That's not happening again." We left them all behind without looking back, and I don't know if the police even found those boys, at least as far as we know. And the mall never called us to follow anything up. But after that summer, things did in fact change. My dad didn't drop us off anywhere anymore. I stopped wanting to wander so far from people that I trusted. And Kate, for months after, refused to go anywhere without me. It was just a wrong turn. That's what I kept telling myself over and over. But sometimes one wrong turn is all it takes to learn how fast everything can go dark. We were planning that caving trip for weeks, I think months if you count the idle talk before we actually set a hard date. It wasn't our first time down there, at least not for me, and definitely not for Lee. The place was a known hangout, an old limestone cave system on the edge of town. Something every college kid in the area eventually would explore. It wasn't exactly a secret, and it gave this strange reputation. Equal parts no big deal, and absolute nightmare, depending on who you asked. There were 5 of us that morning, me, Lee, Matt, Chris, and Weston. We pulled into the trailhead in 2 cars, hauling bags of gear, helmets, water, and a mix of excitement and nerves that you get when you're about to do something a little stupid. I remember standing at the cave mouth, gear cinched tight, sun already blotted out by the ridge overhead, feeling that cool breath of the cave blow across my face. Nobody said it out loud, but we all felt it. The shift from open sky to the black hole of a rock. I'm a pretty cautious guy by nature, maybe even obsessively, but I kept that tucked under my grin as we dropped into the dark. Inside, it was as expected. Narrow switchbacks, damp walls, the wet scrape of boots on stone. Lee and I led the way, pointing out familiar markers, the route that we all knew that we should loop back to the surface in a tight 2-mile circuit. I wasn't worried, at least not yet. But in caves, things really don't stay familiar for too long. That's the first rule you forget when you think you know what you're doing. We slipped deeper, headlamps throwing pale beams across slick stone and narrow gaps. The air turned cool and wet, carrying the mineral smell of damp rock and old earth. Lee kept up his usual running commentary, pointing out landmarks, cracks in the wall that resembled faces, and of course, odd graffiti left behind by past visitors. Chris and Matt cracked jokes behind us, their voices bouncing weirdly off the walls, sometimes sounding closer than they actually were. Weston stayed mostly quiet, breathing through his mouth, his footsteps light as if trying not to disturb the dark itself. I continued to take mental notes as we moved, sharp left at the narrow chute, down the belly crawl, right at the open chamber with the old fire marks. The loop was imprinted in my head, I was sure of it. We reached that 3-way split maybe an hour in, a place where the tunnel fractured, leading left, center, and then right into the earth. "Center's the main loop," Lee said confidently, shining his headlamp straight ahead. It curves back around to the chute. I frowned, shaking my head. No, it's left. I remember the left turn. Lee scoffed at me. Man, you're thinking of the old map. They rerouted some of this after the collapse a few years back. Just trust me. For a minute, the group hesitated, eyes flicking between me and Lee. Eventually, Lee's authority won out altogether. We shifted gears, squeezed packs tighter, and filed into that center tunnel. It did not take long for things to quickly change. That center path narrowed really fast, walls closing in until we were moving single file, shoulders brushing against the stone. In some of those spots, we had to edge sideways over these narrow ledges. A black drop yawning beneath us, a place where one slip meant a fall nobody would walk away from. Matt made these nervous jokes, Chris swore under his breath, and Weston was still completely silent. I brought up the rear, watching the light flicker on the walls ahead, trying not to think about how the air felt thinner in here, the kind of thin that makes you pull each breath a little deeper. And that's when those noises started. At first it was really small, the faint clatter of pebbles behind me, a soft shuffle like shoes over stone. I turned fast, shining my headlamp down the tunnel that we'd come through, but there was nothing there, just the same narrow path, completely empty. Okay, maybe it was just some loose rock, the echo of our own movement, maybe a bat shifting in a crevice. But the sound came again, a faint scruff this time, something soft brushing against the wall. Guys, I called forward, keeping my voice as steady as I could. You hear that? Nobody answered, and I kept moving. We crossed a section where the path tilted steeply upward, requiring hands and knees to scramble over this slick stone. By the time we leveled out, the air was now heavier and the tunnel was tighter. Sense of direction had begun to slip from underneath us. Lee finally stopped, panting, sweat cutting streaks through the dirt in his face. All right, he muttered, turning to me. I think maybe we should have turned left. I didn't gloat, I didn't smile, I just stared at him, heart pounding, mouth dry. I think we should keep going, I said quietly. Lee blinked. What? Why? I adjusted my helmet and glanced back down the path. Because I don't think we're alone in here, guys. The words came out cold, matter of fact, like reading a lab report, but I felt the tremor in my chest. Chris snorted in response. Dude, do not screw with us right now. Weston spoke up, his voice was low and tight. I heard something too, breathing in, a voice. Now that silenced everybody. We checked our batteries, gulped down some water, and tried to crack a few more nervous jokes, but nobody laughed. Then, a scream, thin and high, echoing down the tunnel, rising up from the deep like something peeling itself out of the stone. We froze. Lee hissed, back now. We stumbled into motion, shifting backwards at first, then turning and half jogging, headlamps bouncing wildly over the stone. We reached the split, and I panicked. My mind snagged on the wrong map, muscle memory pulling me left. Not the real left, but the middle tunnel we'd just come from. We were halfway down before Lee's shout stopped us. No, not that way, he roared, grabbing my pack and yanking me hard. Left, far left. That sound then came again, scraping, rattling, breath on stones. Something was moving, fast. We bolted into the left tunnel, feet pounding, hands slapping against the wall for balance. The air sharpened, cold enough to burn your lungs, but the path up ahead curved, and up meant hope, up meant light. My headlamp caught the first glint of it around 40 minutes later, faint, washed out sunlight bleeding through the last stretch of stone. We all tore up that final incline, legs trembling, boots slipping, and burst off into the daylight like drowning men breaking the surface. We didn't even stop after we broke. Not until we were halfway down the hill, gulping air, clawing at helmets on our heads. We reached the cars without another word, tossed our gear in, and drove. I don't think anybody spoke until we were 20 miles from the cave. Back in town, we parked at a diner, mostly because it was open and had lights that felt a little brighter, normal. We sat in a corner booth, muddy, scratched up, and hands still trembling when we reached for water glasses. Nobody really had an appetite, though. I don't get it, Lee muttered, finally rubbing his eyes. I know that center tunnel loop back. It's on every map, every forum, every trip report. I watched him from across the table, watched the way his hands trembled and how his face was pale under all that dirt. Well, it didn't today, I said quietly. Weston hunched over his drink, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. Matt stared into the middle of the distance. Chris kept flicking his phone on and off, checking for a signal. We sat there for a long time, picking apart the what-ifs, the maybes, the rational explanations. Maybe it was just an animal, a mountain lion probably. We pushed into its space, maybe even trapped it deeper inside. That would explain the noises, the breath, even the scream. But I'm not sure if anybody believed that. That night back at our dorms, I tried to sleep, but the dark had changed me. The dark wasn't absent anymore, it was present. For days after, I dug through every online forum, every local archive, even called a couple of caving clubs. Nothing. No legends, no ghost stories, no disappearances or any kind of sightings. Just a cave system that ate up careless college kids, spat them back out rattled and bruised and waiting for the next ones. Lee sent me a link the next week, some wildlife article about mountain lions in the area, complete with grainy trail cam shots and warning about cubs. He signed off with, "Must have been that, right?" I couldn't find an answer for him, because here's the thing. I know what a mountain lion sounds like. Sure, they can scream like a woman, but what about everything else? What I heard in that cave, those sharp breaths, the scratching, the voice whispering just out of reach, none of that belonged to claws or fangs. I think it belonged to something older, something deeper, something still waiting down there in the dark, listening for the next wrong turn. All the while, I can't help but wonder, when we ran, when we scrambled back into the light, when Lee grabbed my pack and yanked me onto the right path, what would have actually happened if I kept leading us the wrong way?